Hey, this is Andrew Steck from Hearing is Healing Christian Counseling, and we are going to talk about the Immanuel approach and how the Immanuel approach is another one of the listening skills that we can use both in therapeutic work within a session, um, and also as a skill that you use outside of session to help with just mental health skills to help improve mental health. So I'm going to tell the story about Carl Lehman. You see a picture of Carl Lehman here. So I'm going to tell the story of Carl Lehman and how he developed the Immanuel approach for emotional healing. And in telling the story, I think it's a really good description of what exactly the Immanuel approach is. So that's why I'm going to tell the story. And the story really comes from what I've pieced together. I've read both of his books, but also he has his own website. So there's the immanuelapproach.com website that's there. On that website, there's links to like articles and things that he has written. And a lot of those things were written as he was developing the Immanuel approach. Um, and you can even see as you kind of go through and you read um, what he's put there, that it's something that he developed over some time. So I'm going to tell the story as I hear it from both the books and that he's written, and I'm just hearing him on podcasts and things like that. But also, a lot of this comes from those articles. So Carl Lehman is a medical doctor who's a psychiatrist, and he again developed the Immanuel approach, which really is a Christian inner healing prayer approach that therapists can use in therapy, but also lay people use. Like there's a lot of churches that will have a prayer team of one or two people that they will use like an Immanuel approach with people. So the way it was developed is interesting. So uh, Carl, he tells the story as I remember it, that he started using just Christian inner healing prayer early in his career. And this would be, Christian inner healing of going to a place of trauma and asking Jesus, hey, Jesus, when this traumatic thing happened, where were you? And he talks about um, the amount of healing that he saw people have in that, and it wasn't really impressive. But there were times that Jesus would do it. He would come in and maybe it was horrific abuse or some other type of trauma, and it does happen that Jesus will come into those just being invited in. Hey, Jesus, where were you? He would Carl would watch God heal. And again, I don't have the percentages right in front of me. I believe it's in the first. There's an online. Um, you can read some of his Immanuel approach book, and I believe it's in there talking about the percentages. But otherwise, it's on his website with the other articles. But then what happens is he learned EMDR as a therapist. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a evidence-based trauma approach that therapists use. And he learned it kind of years ago. And what he found was that the EMDR, he got better results than just inviting Jesus in and doing an old school traditional inner healing prayer. Again, this is for resolving trauma. And then he learned another inner healing prayer modality. Um, and he says that he got better results using that than he did using EMDR. And so that approach would be Ed Smith's. Uh, it used to be called theophostic prayer. And so he talks about how when he used that and then he tweaked it, and the way he was doing theophostic prayer had his own kind of flavor to it. But when he used that, he got better results than when he used EMDR. And in his articles, he talks about how he has had a team that he's had some of his own inner healing work on, where they'll, do the facilitating or they're praying with him. And then he's been the facilitator and the ones that pray with others. And in the midst of doing this, they found out that if they switch it around and in like traditional inner healing prayer, Well, in theophostic prayer, what used to be called theophostic prayer by Ed Smith, what happens is you go to the trauma, and you ask Jesus, what's the lie I was believing? You find the lie. You ask Jesus, what's the truth? And by doing that, you're bringing the interactive, connection with Jesus into the trauma. They found if they switched the order, they got better results. Meaning, you start out with the God encounter. You start out with the place where someone is hearing and connecting with Jesus, and then you go to the trauma. If you do that, they found that they got better results, or he found that he got better results, and people were more stabilized, and it just worked a lot better than um, using the theophostic prayer. So that's the story he tells. And then in the midst of that, so that is the Immanuel approach for trauma, which as a therapist, I do use sometimes just the straight Immanuel approach for trauma. I also sometimes just use straight EMDR, use a lot of just EMDR actually. Um, but in doing that, what he found is that when individuals would have this active living connection with Jesus, where it felt true that Jesus was talking to them, it felt true that they were hearing, what they would report from Jesus is that he would say things like, this thing right now of just hearing from me, of seeing me, hearing from me, being connected to me, this is like the point of everything. And so they started to just have the Immanuel approach for life. Um, the Immanuel approach for life is just getting connected with Jesus, even when we're not going to go into trauma. And so that in itself is a really powerful thing. So that's what we're going to look at in a second, is how do you do less of the trauma piece and more of how do I get a living, active connection with Jesus using the Immanuel approach for life as Carl Lehman has developed it. So that's what we're going to look at. Okay, so here's the Immanuel approach. And the Immanuel approach is so easy that as a therapist, when someone, so this would be a Christian client that wants to bring, these things into session, sometimes I can bring someone into this in about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. You explain what it is. There's a memory piece. You bring up the memory, and then it goes point two, three, four. All of a sudden, they're speaking out what God's telling them. So I think the thing that can be hard with the Immanuel approach is to not make it more complicated than it is, because it is so simple. So the first step is, and again, this is how I understand Immanuel approach and how I've been using it based off of Carl Lehman's work, and then kind of repackaging it and putting it 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how I'm using the Immanuel approach. So here's the summary as it's taught, my summary as it's taught in his work, in Carl Lehman's work. So the first thing is we identify a past positive memory. So a memory from the past. And there's really two types of memories that we can use. One of them, and it's the second one listed there, is an appreciation memory. And this would be a memory where you're thinking about something from the past where you just have a sense of thankfulness. So you can be thinking about anything. You can be thinking about, I remember 3 weeks ago, I was hanging out with a friend and I was having lunch with him, and it was just such a great experience being with this friend and talking to him. And I just feel so thankful for this friend. That would be a great appreciation memory. And the Immanuel approach is likely to work really, really well with that. So that's an appreciation memory. It can be, I remember Christmas last year, and it felt so good to give my loved one a gift and to get a gift from someone. That also, but if you can feel thankfulness when you talk about it, where you can develop that thankfulness, that's how it works. And Carl, being the extremely smart person that he is, goes into the brain science of all this. There's the relational circuits of your brain. That's what you're doing when you are having that past positive memory. I found, again, with clients, the less they know that, the less they know that there's brain science stuff going on, the easier this is to just get people flowing and listening. So appreciation memory, that's one type of memory. The other type of memory is a connection memory. And so a connection memory is a memory where you have had some kind, and the word encounter, we can sometimes think it's more than it really is. So this is a time where I was in God's presence and it felt true that Jesus hears me, knows me, understands me. And it feels true that I hear him and I know him and I understand him. So that's a connection memory. So oftentimes it can be, you know, 3 weeks ago at church or last week at church, I was in a worship service. Maybe my hands were up and I was just receiving from God. And I just had this sense of the Lord showing me how much he loved me. And we were singing about the lyrics were something about how much it cost Jesus on the cross and how much he loves me. And I just had it just felt so true that he loves just me. It's not just that he loves the whole world, he loves just me. And it felt true that I could hear from him and I could know him in that moment and I could understand him and he knew me and he knows me and he understood me. And so the key with the connection memory is the word feel. It feels true in that moment. It felt true that there was that interactive connection. That's a connection memory. So those are the two type of memories. As far as using the manual approach, it is just so unbelievably simple. And the beauty is in the simplicity of this. So I love using this. I use it myself all the time. I use it with clients all the time. And it's just so simple. The first step is you have that memory and then you just think about it. Again, there's brain science stuff going on, from a brain science lens. We know we're using state specific memory, which would be a memory where it's state specific, where I can. So if I'm having a memory of I'm with a friend, it's an appreciation memory, and I'm at a park and we're playing frisbee, and I just felt so much joy doing that. So I'm picturing the yellow and blue frisbee coming at me, and I'm catching it, and I'm throwing it back, and I'm seeing my friend's face, and I'm seeing the leaves in the trees, and that sense of the wind blowing on me. And since I was there, I'm not making anything up. I'm just remembering what that was like. So that's that first step. And again, it can be an appreciation memory, it can be a connection memory, it can be one where I felt God's presence, it can be one where I just appreciate something. So we bring it up, we load it up. It can be, in my experience, it can be 20, 30 seconds. It can be a minute. You don't have to hold it even that long. Uh, so that's the first step. You think about it, and then step 2, 3, and 4 go so fast. You offer specific thanksgiving for it. You tell the Lord, Jesus, thank you for my friend that responded to me when I called him on the phone and said, hey, you want to just go hang out with me at a park? And he said, yeah. And so thank you for how fun that was just to throw that frisbee back and forth. And so I'm just being thankful for it. That's the second step. You just offer specific thanksgiving to God. The more you deepen the thanksgiving, the more this will work. So if you're having trouble with it, sometimes it's just we didn't get to the place of thanksgiving enough, and we just need to deepen that a little bit. But we don't want to complicate it. So number 2 is we just offer that thanksgiving to God. Number 3 is we make an explicit request to connect with Jesus. And I found that for this one especially, it's important not to just think it, but to say it to Jesus. So you say something like, so you're picturing this image, this memory of throwing the frisbee back and forth, and as you're just there, you say, Jesus, would you connect with me here? That's all it is. And then the fourth part, again, this goes so fast, is you just speak out whatever comes into your awareness. Whatever it is, it might be a subtle shift of peace. Oh yeah, I just kind of feel like peace as I do that. Or it could be, I kind of just sense the Lord being with me. This is called Immanuel approach, because at the core of it, Jesus is always with us. Immanuel means God with us. So Immanuel is God with us. That's what Immanuel means. So the Immanuel approach is the God with us approach. And so I'm wanting that interactive connection. So I'm speaking out. Maybe I have a sense that he's kind of with me. Or maybe I just have the sense of being loved. Or maybe I have a sense of, and it might be a little bit. So we just speak out whatever comes into our awareness. It's really important to just speak it out and to not try to question it as it's coming. So sometimes what will happen is someone will think, you know what? I was playing frisbee, so and it's not working because now I'm seeing a candy cane. My mind must be wandering. And so I might say, if I'm facilitating this, I might say to the person I'm doing this with, or the client I'm with, I might say, okay, so you're seeing a candy cane. Does that mean anything to you? Oh, that's kind of weird that you say that because it's the type of candy cane that we used to have when I was little at my grandparents' house. And I just remember the sense of like love that was around the Christmas tree. And it's funny because even as I say that, it's like just this sense of I am just loved by God. And I'm still in that memory where I'm playing catch, but I just now I'm kind of feeling that love of being, like my grandparents loved me. It was so unconditional. It was just so peaceful. And there's like they were excited over me all the time. And I'm just thinking about that. So the key is you speak whatever comes into your awareness. And that's the fourth step. So speaking pulls the material to the front of our brain so we can fully understand what God's communicating to us. So in the last video that we did, in Mark Verkler's The Four Keys to Hearing God's Voice, we write it down and it kind of makes sense to us as we're writing it. With this one, we speak it out. Um, so that's how the Immanuel approach works. I use this with myself, and I coach clients to do it, where you also can use that last part of speaking what comes into your awareness. If you're using this with yourself, you can also just write down whatever the sense is. So that also can be there. Again, it's pulling it to the front of our brain and it's making sense as we're writing it down. So that's how the Immanuel approach works. And it's so simple, it's so easy. So we just start with the memory, we thank the Lord for it, and then 2, 3, 4 goes so fast. We thank the Lord, we ask Him to connect with us, and we just speak out whenever it comes to our awareness. Or if you're doing this by yourself, like for therapy homework, I have the memory, I thank Jesus for it. I say, Jesus, where were you in that place, or would you connect with me again? And I just write down whatever comes into my awareness. Or you could use your phone to record your voice too. There's something powerful that happens. Carl Lehman designed this. This has been, I'm taking his work, so we want to honor where it comes from. It's really designed as a dyadic thing where there's another person facilitating with me, or even a triad where there's a couple people with me. So that's the Immanuel approach. So if I was uh, doing this with groups, like in a group setting, we would have people get into groups of 3 if they're comfortable. When I've led mental health groups, I've also had people, we'll use this in a mental health group, but we'll just kind of have everyone practice those steps and then they write out whatever comes into their awareness, and then you can share it and talk about it afterwards. So, and our next video, what we're going to do, stay tuned for that. We're going to look at our next video where we look at how cognitive behavioral therapy can be used along with listening skills and how listening skills can help enhance cognitive behavioral therapy.